This is the AAC Report, only on the Knightline Sports Network. Monday, April 8th, I'm Jeff Allen. First up on the program, we're going to talk about the UConn women's team reaching the Final Four and their 2019 season. And joining us for that is Kelli Stacy of the Harford Courant. Kelli, thank you for sharing your time this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, over in Tampa, a tough loss to Notre Dame in the semifinal, which the lead changed hands 26 times. UConn actually had a 9-point lead. I guess these Irish Huskies battles certainly live up to the hype, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every time that they've met, it's been pretty exciting, especially in recent years. Obviously, the past few years, there have been some really iconic games between these two. And
so coming into the Final Four, I know after they advanced, Geno Auriemma had kind of said his team had kind of sucked this year a little bit. Is that something he was overselling as a motivation tactic, you think?
I honestly don't think so. He kind of said throughout the year, even at the beginning, before the season even started, that this was a team that just didn't have as many of the pieces as UConn teams are used to having. They're used to going into these games or into these seasons with a pretty complete team. And this season, they had to replace 2 starters, and they just didn't have as much as they usually do. And he wasn't as confident in this team as he is about most of his teams.
So let's talk about the state of the Huskies program. So they have lost in the semifinal round the last 3 seasons after 4 consecutive national titles. Now, these semifinal losses are all near misses, too, so it's not like they were shunned away and embarrassed in any of these. So where do you see the program where it stands at this point in time?
I know a lot of UConn fans are really concerned about the fact that they have lost in the Final Four in the past 3 years. But the thing is, I don't think next year they're going to be, as good as people would like them to be either. But they already have 2 recruits for the class of 2020. One of them is the number 1 recruit in the country. Another is a point guard from Croatia. And I really think that, Geno is kind of in a rebuilding phase right now. And, in a couple of years, I think that UConn is going to be really, really good again. Not that they aren't already. I think that people have this standard for UConn women's basketball that is a national championship every single year, which is kind of just a crazy standard to have. And, UConn has built that themselves by winning so much. But, it's kind of crazy to think about a year like this year or the past 2 years where a semifinal loss is considered, a bad season for them. And next year it's going to be even harder, I think, to get there.
Yeah, those are words you don't often hear together. A Final Four team rebuilding, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about a little bit about, in women's college basketball, UConn did set the standard by having the huge 110-game winning streak, winning consecutive national titles. And so I think it was sort of, the Final Four was thought of as the UConn Invitational, and everybody else was playing for second place. And so now you've got, a mix of 3 or 4 teams now that are up at UConn's level with Baylor and Notre Dame and Louisville. Mississippi State has been in the mix. As far as women's college basketball, how is this elevating the sport?
I think that it's really, really good for the game because you're starting to see people who, weren't fans of UConn because, maybe they live on the West Coast or they aren't a big fan of Geno. But now they start having these teams in other areas of the country that are kind of in their wheelhouse. And so you're starting to see more fans who are actually interested in women's basketball because more teams are being successful. You see it at Oregon, and, their fan base has grown so much over the past 4 years. And you see it at Baylor where they've had success in the past, but, then they kind of went through a lull and now they're getting back up toward the top. And, of course, Notre Dame has always had a pretty strong fan base. Louisville, I was in Louisville for their game against UConn this year, and it was packed. It was crazy. I just think the more success each of these teams have and the more competitive these matchups become, the better it is for the sport and the more people who are drawn to watching it.
Does not having viable competition in the American Athletic Conference put a limitation on the Huskies? I mean, UCF was the number 2 team in the conference, and they're a very good story themselves, but you still look at the distance between UConn and UCF, and it's still a pretty wide gap.
Yeah, I mean, the conference is kind of held UConn back for quite a while, and everyone's pretty aware of that. That was something that went into them being a number 2 seed this year, was strength of schedule. And, Geno tries to combat that as much as he can. He schedules plenty of hard non-conference games. I think next season they have Baylor, Oregon, and Notre Dame all at home, I believe. And it's going to be a really tough non-conference schedule for them. And they did the same thing this year. They scheduled a lot of tough non-conference games. But it's kind of hard to negate, how easy the conference games are for them. And so, yeah, it's definitely hurt them, but there's not anything they can really do about it.
What is Geno Auriemma like? He's certainly a polarizing, legendary figure in women's college hoops, and he's certainly a strong personality. You cover him on a regular basis. So what would surprise us about him that, that like most of the country doesn't see or hear about?
I think, I've only been covering Geno for a year, but I think that the thing that I've really taken away from him is that, you see a lot of quotes from Geno and a lot of things that get people's attention, and, people generally either love or hate him. But I think that a lot of things end up taken out of context with him. And also, when you're in person with him, you realize he's a really genuine person. So, he's always going to give you his honest opinion about everything. But also, if you're around him on a regular basis, he wants to know, hey, how's it going? I moved to Connecticut from Oklahoma to take this job. And, the first 2 or 3 times that I saw Geno, we would talk women's basketball, and I would get my interview in, and then he would, want to know how I'm adjusting to Connecticut and how's life going and how are you doing. And he's just a very genuine person. And I'm not sure that people always realize that just based on some of the quotes you see out there sometimes.
Yeah, and obviously, the quotes that are being fed out are in small sound bites and things like that, so people can kind of make determinations that maybe not really be realistic, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially recently, there have been some quotes out there, and you can only do so much to give people the real story after the first version kind of gets sent out there. And anytime I see quotes from Geno floating around, and they're quotes that I've been around to actually hear, then I generally will tweet out like the full context of the quote so that people can understand, how it was meant whenever he said it. Because there are a lot of things that if you don't put them in context, they're going to come off the wrong way. And so I try to give everyone as much context as possible. But, anything Geno says, because he's such a polarizing figure, can kind of just blow up and become a big thing, whether he meant it one way or not.
So you mentioned you think it's going to be tougher for UConn to get back to the Final Four next year. They're losing Nafisa Collier and Katie Lou Samuelson to graduation. Who are the players you think that are going to be called upon to take the mantle for those two?
Well, it's going to be complicated next year because, with losing those two, whenever you look at their bench, the first thought is Olivia Nelson-Adota is almost most definitely going to take one of the spots. She's going to step in for Nafisa. She's a freshman this year, and she's had her ups and downs, but she's really kind of come along in the later half of the season. And I think, after their Final Four game this week, Geno said, she's going to be, his quote was, a dynamite player. And I really think she is. She's still a little bit rough around the edges, though. She needs this off season to really kind of grow. And then that last spot that's open, it wouldn't appear that anyone from the bench would really be able to step up and kind of fill Katie Lou's role. But Aubrey Griffin is their only recruit coming in next year. She's from Ossining, New York. And a good thing for UConn is that whenever she was at New York State Federations for the state championship, she broke a whole bunch of Brianna Stewart's records. And so it's a really good sign for UConn. And I think she's, much like Kristen Williams, going to have to kind of step up and be a starter her freshman year and, go through all of those growing pains. But other than that, UConn is looking for graduate transfers, I would assume, and they're still looking overseas. So you never know. They could add somebody late. But as of right now, I would think that Olivia and Aubrey would be the two who would be stepping up.
So what were your impressions of covering your first women's Final Four over in Tampa?
I thought it was really, really cool, and I was very excited, just to see how many fans came out, not only UConn fans, but fans for every team. I think it's amazing to watch the game grow, and, so many people were there. They were very intense, very passionate fans. They really cared. And I thought it was really a great sign of the growth of women's college basketball.
All right, Kelli, Stacy of the Harford Courant covering the UConn women's basketball team. We thank you for taking time to join us on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Elsewhere in the American Conference, Kelvin Sampson will stay the head coach at Houston, a 6-year contract extension. That'll boost his salary to $3 million per season. He was targeted by Arkansas. He has been re-upped by the Cougs. His son, Kellen Sampson, will be the coach in waiting. Wichita State made the Final Four of the NIT, but they lost their semifinal game to Lipscomb 71-64. The Shockers finish out the campaign with a 22-15 record. South Florida won the CBI, defeating DePaul 77-65 in Friday's championship game. That's a 3-game series to decide the College Basketball Invitational Championship. USF had let a 17-point lead dip down to 1, but they responded to capture the crown. David Collins scoring 19 and was the tournament MVP. Turning to some other festivities of the college basketball postseason, Houston's Corey Davis Jr., Galen Robinson Jr., and Temple's Shiz Austin Jr. They played for the West All-Stars in the 2019 Reese's College All-Star Game. Davis tabbed 15 points, Austin netted 14, and Robinson had 5 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists as the West lost by 10. Moving over to the three-point slam dunk contest, UCF's B.J. Taylor finished second in the three-point shooting contest, sponsored by State Farm, losing in the final to Clayton Custer of Loyola 19-14. Corey Davis also took part in that competition, making it to the semifinals. Tulsa's DaQuan Jeffries came away as the winner in the Great Clips Slam Dunk Championship. The Dos Equis 3-on-3U National Championship, that's where each conference has a team represented. Memphis' Jeremiah Martin, Kevon Davenport, they teamed up with ECU's Isaac Fleming and Tulane's Jordan Cornish to take on teams from the other D1 conferences. The American lost in the quarters to NEC's conference, the Northeast Conference. University of Cincinnati guard Jaron Cumberland has been named Honorable Mention All-America by the Associated Press, the 2019 AAC Player of the Year, and the Championship Tournament Most Outstanding Player. Averaged 18.8 points, 4.4 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and 1.1 steals this past season. And breaking today, UCF's Aubrey Dawkins will forego his final season of eligibility and turn pro. His 32-point outburst against Duke in the NCAA tournament certainly helped springboard his profile after a 15.5 rebound per game average this past season. He also shot 40% from three-point range. Turning to baseball, some honors being doled out. The Player of the Week, Cody Host, had an outstanding week at the plate for Tulane, batting .579. He tallied 11 hits, 9 RBIs, 9 runs scored, 4 home runs, 2 doubles, and a pair of walks that included in his week against Wichita State. Multiple hits and RBIs through all 4 games last week, including a career 5-for-5 performance with 3 RBIs, 2 home runs, and 3 runs scored at New Orleans on Tuesday night. The pitcher of the week, UCF's Chris Williams. The senior pitched 6.1 scoreless innings Saturday and a 5-0 Game 2 win over USF to clinch the series in a rain delay that pushed the Saturday night game to Sunday morning's finish. Recorded his 3rd quality start of the season. He struck out 6 while scattering 4 hits, issuing no walks, and retiring the side in order 5 times. In the baseball standings, ECU still atop. They are now up to number 10 in the country. 8-1 in the conference, 24-7 overall to lead the way there. Tulane in second at 4-2, 21-11 overall. From softball, the Player of the Week is Brianna Marcelino from UConn. Second straight series win in the American last week. She hit .611 with 9 RBIs, 4 multi-hit games, a pair of doubles and a home run in 6 games while scoring 7 runs. And Mary Beth Olson from UConn was the AAC Pitcher of the Week, recording 3 victories, including a pair of complete game wins last week. She tossed a no-hitter in midweek action against Hartford before earning 2 wins against Memphis in conference play. In 20 innings, she's allowed 9 hits and 6 runs while striking out 28. And we'll end with this cool story. University of Houston senior All-American Leonie Harm was one of the participants in the inaugural Augusta National Women's Amateur. The first 2 rounds were played at Champions Retreat. She did not make the cut for the final round at Augusta National, but did get to play the famed course with all the tournament participants in a Friday practice round. That was certainly a history-making event at Augusta National. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88 and check out my personal podcast, Jeff Allen Sports Talk, at JeffAllenSportsTalk.com. This has been the AAC Reports, only on the Knightline Sports Network. Thanks for listening.